So a few years ago, I was at an event, and Bill Clinton comes in, and if you're not aware, that was the former governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton. And so Bill Clinton comes up to me, he goes, he said, hey, I know you. And we had never met, and I was like, and he goes, I love that show, Duck Dynasty. And for whatever, I don't know what possessed me to say what I was fixing to say, what I said to his face. I said, you never watched Duck Dynasty. I don't know why I thought that. And he looks at me, like grabs me on the shoulder, and he like went into president mode, and he's like squinting his eyes. He goes, I love that show. I was a governor of Arkansas. My best friend's a Pentecostal preacher from Louisiana. And he goes, you want to know why that show worked? And I was like, yeah, I would love to know why Bill Clinton thinks Duck Dynasty worked. He like bites his lip. He goes, because it was real. And I remember thinking like, what? You know, like, and he goes, if it wasn't real, we thought it was real. That's a political answer.
You guys have been at this a long time, and it's been a fun, exciting journey, I guess. Of course, you guys have had a lot of success, but talk to me about the beginning days a little bit. Where did it get started? Because it hasn't been all this glamorous the whole time.
In relation to what?
In relation specifically to business.
Business?
Yeah.
Oh, business.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to get to y'all later.
Yeah, well, I interviewed Korie to work for our business in 5th grade.
You saw it in me in 5th grade.
See, I knew. I said, this girl's got potential.
We actually did meet in 5th grade, but that's not where the business started. So you should just tell a little bit about like your dad and inventing the duck call and all that.
Yeah.
Go back to the beginning, babe.
Okay, well, I'll take you back. So the business Duck Commander was created in, they tell me, 1972, which was the year I was born. So in my mind, I thought when I was born, Phil saw me and was like, this is going to be the face of our business, but which is not true because Phil was not there when I was born. They were in difficult times. Reference the movie The Blind if you want to learn about the trauma of our childhood and all that. Once Phil came to the Lord, got himself lined out, as he says, then he really focused in on selling these duck calls. So Duck Commander was, I think in 72, that was the idea, and he'd come up with this kind of this read system he wanted to build. Then he starts making the duck calls. But when I was a kid, mostly what I remember from business is fishing. Like that was a commercial fisherman. So we moved right on the river. And most of how we paid our bills was through fishing, so it wasn't a lot of money. It was all like a cash deal too. So, but he sold the duck calls, and he was like, "One of these days, we're going to sell $1 million worth." And it didn't really make sense, but we thought, well, why not? So we were poor growing up. We did all the jobs of Duck Commander, so the employees were pretty much us, meaning me and my brothers and Mom. Mom kind of ran the office stuff, and this was all out of our little small living room. And so I folded boxes, answered the phone, did customer service, and we would write down orders. And the first big break that we had was when Walmart took us, speaking of Arkansas. And so Dad would go, and he would go on a loop, he would say. So he'd drive around pretty much the Arklatex and sell duck calls to little sporting goods stores. Well, he would go into Walmart stores, and this is before the super centers and all that, and Walmart can, I believe they still can, buy goods. They can buy direct store delivery, local whatever. Stores. Yeah. So he'd go in and he'd sell a dozen, like in West Monroe, and then he would go up to Farmville, which is the next town up from here, and he would say, hey, Bobby just bought a dozen, and they say, oh yeah, okay, let me put a dozen in, and then he'd go to El Dorado, and then he'd go. So he would just drive around. Well, he got up to like 40 stores, Walmart stores that he was selling to, direct store delivery, and the buyer at Walmart notices that all these Duck Commander duck calls are being sold in his stores, and he doesn't know what it is, and so he's like, who is this Duck Commander? And they were like, we have no idea. So he calls the house, which was the office, and he goes, can I speak to Phil Robertson? And Phil gets on the phone. He goes, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm the buyer for Walmart out of Bentonville. He said, Mr. Robertson, how are you getting how are you selling all these duck calls to my stores? And Phil said, one at a time.
One at a time.
And so the guy laughed and said, why don't you come up to Bentonville? Maybe I can help you out, and we can see if we can get them into more stores. So Phil goes up there. They meet with Walmart, and then boom, we're in like 2,000 Walmart stores all over the country. And so that was our first big break. That's when the fishing kind of stopped, and as far as doing it commercially, and that's when we just went into full-time selling duck calls. So now this is about, I'm in junior high, probably fixed to go to high school. I never dreamed I would work for this company. I was like, I am out of here. When I get old enough, I'm taking off. I'm going to do something different, and it won't be this. And then Korie and I got married and went to college. I didn't plan on going to college, but Korie and her dad thought it'd be a great idea for me to go to college. So so I went to, we were at Harding up in Searcy, and then when Korie graduated early, it took me a couple more years, but so I transferred back here to West Monroe, and that's when I started working for her family, running the summer camp, Camp Chioka, and they were, and I'll let her speak to their business since, but they were super successful at business, and then still I would kind of help Dad out a little bit. The summer camp worked well with the winter sales of ducks and all that, and it wasn't until I was 30 that I swung back to. I'd kind of seen duck commander at that point. I'd seen it from afar, and so I was like, man, I think there's really something here, you know. And so I went down there. I started working for the company, and I would travel. In the early days, I would just go with Phil. We would go to shows. He was speaking a lot at like little Beast Feast things, and I would sell the products in the back, and he would speak. And I just saw the following he had, and I thought, man, I think we can make this into something. And so we approached Mom and Dad with actually taking over the company and running it, and they were open. They were kind of tired, and we're like, Dad said, I think we've sold all the duck calls we're ever going to sell. Like, he thought it was over. And I said, well, now this was, and the timing was really perfect because this was right about the time the internet, websites, all that was just kind of coming into fruition. And so Korie and I saw a real opportunity there to start a website. Well, we went to Dad, and Dad was like, "No, we don't need a website. You know, tell people to call if they want to order a duck call." I said, "Dad, I think people are going to order." So Korie and I actually took over the website that had been created by this is a small town. Her dad had started the duckcommander.com website because he was in the publishing business, and so he sold some products on there, just a one-page sheet. You know, you just went on and ordered the stuff. So we finagled a deal with him. We got that. And then Korie and I started to run that business out of our own house. So it was separate than Duck Commander. So in a way, I was back to when I was a kid. We would take all the phone calls. I would ship all the orders. Like, we had our garage. We moved our cars out. And we just had like duck calls and stuff. But we were able to speak to the customer direct. And so that was very helpful to kind of see where they're at. And we did all kind of things. Korie did the Duckaholics Anonymous. Remember, we had a fan club. We did that. Korie hand-painted duck calls. She did that. And then we just sold stuff, and we're able to kind of make enough money we had tons of little kids at the time. So we did that, and that's how we got started until it got bigger and bigger.
Now, when I think of y'all today, I see faith being like just injected in every part of the business side. Was it always that way? I mean, at what point did you guys start to convert and really put your faith out there in the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, that was always there. And so Dad, again, I'll reference that movie, The Blind. So The Blind shows Mom and Dad's kind of journey to faith, and this is late 60s, early 70s is when that happened. And once Phil became a believer, he just went all in. I mean, he was just like, that's all he wanted to talk about was his faith. So as much as he was consumed with hunting and ducks and all that, he was even more consumed with the gospel and with especially telling others. He wanted to preach to other people and try to convert people. And so, and there was a moment, originally we were going to put this in the movie, but it ended up not making it in there. But it was about 1980 is when the business was starting to people were starting to know what Duck Commander was. We were in New Orleans and for a big show, and Dad gets up and he does his duck calls, and he's there to sell stuff. And then he just puts his duck calls down and he goes, well, I figure I might as well just preach y'all a little sermon too. And so he gets his Bible out, which was really not, you just didn't see that at a show like this. And people are like about half drunk. They're like, hey, man, and Phil just starts preaching. And so he had a colleague tell him, like, Phil, you're not going to be able to do that. Like, you can't mix the religion and your business, like it's awkward, and you know you need your faith to be one thing. And Phil kind of made a stand. He said, "No, this is, you know, as bad as I was, I'm gonna give it all to God." And so he was like, "It's gonna be part of the package," and that never got separated. And so, and in fact, and the business from 1980 to now has done very well. And I felt like it's been ingrained. The faith part has been all part of the business as well. And so if you take that all the way to Duck Dynasty, which, you know, we had a prayer at the end of the show. So we did the same thing. We just integrated that in a TV show, in a reality show, which really wasn't common, especially at the time. And all that went together, and it's just been very positive. So yeah, I would say that's always been the one of the things at the forefront of the business.
I was thinking we probably need to do a blind too of like what happened after, because there's a couple stories that were coming to mind that Phil and Kay have told, and they're kind of just like part of the family lore of like those early days where whenever, like you mentioned, the duck call business, it took a while for it to take off. It was not supporting the family at all. You know, they were commercial fishing, and I think he maybe made like $8,000 like the first year selling duck calls, and but he. Not even that much, probably not even that much.
That was about year 3.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but there's a few stories that Phil and Kay tell of when God just like came through in just truly miraculous ways. There was one story where they talk about how they thought they didn't have the money. They'd bought this big, you know, machine to make the duck calls, this big lathe, and spent way too much money on it. And so they had a loan, and they weren't not going to be able to pay it. There was just no way they could. And they're like, this is over, you know, and Phil says, let me just go out and see, you know, what's in the nets. And literally like this, like biblical, you know, like in the net. So he goes out and he pulls up the nets, and they had enough fish, just enough. They sold it. The last net of the day, they had just enough fish to sell to pay off that loan.
Yeah, the last net had the catfish, which catfish were the most expensive. So if you caught catfish, they were like 70 cents a pound. And so you had these catfish. Also, the order from
China. Yeah, I think it was like Japan or China. Yeah. Another time when they were like, we have no money, like this is it. It's all going to fall apart. And Phil says, well, did you check the mailbox to see if there's any money? And Kay's like, no one owes us any money. There's no money in the mailbox, you know? And so he's like, well, just check the mailbox. So they go down, they check the mailbox, and there's an order for duck calls from Japan. They've never had any other orders from Japan before or since, and they prepaid. And there's a check for the exact amount, and they prepaid for these duck calls. So just a few of those stories where God just provided in miraculous ways, and just, I guess gave them that, courage to just continue and just say, hey, God's in this. We're just going to keep doing it. And, you know, over time, it was just built just little by little by little by little. And I'll never forget whenever I first met the Robertson family. I was in 5th grade. Well, we had met in summer camp that summer before. In 5th grade, I got invited to go down there because they were having a big fish fry. And even when they had no money, they were just very generous. They'd catch fish and have a big fish fry for all the church, and people would come down. And I remember getting invited to go and being so excited because I had met him the summer before and thought he was really cute. He didn't have a beard yet. He had these cute dimples, and I remembered them. And so I came down there, and I remember meeting Phil for the first time, and he's just like big man with this big black beard, white T-shirt, camo pants, and he says, have you met my boys, Willie, Jess, and Jason Silas? This is my friend and I are standing there, and we're like, yes, sir. And he said, they'll be good husbands someday.
There you go.
In 5th grade, he was like pitching him. Yes, he said they're good hunters, they're good fishermen, they're going to be good providers. So he told us that in 5th grade. But I just remember seeing, like, literally there was a basket beside their phone, you know, home phone. There's a basket, and it's like orders just written on paper plates or napkins or whatever. And they would, you know, people would call there, and the boys would answer Duck Commander and write their order on whatever they could grab and throw it in the basket, and then they'd ship. So they were just doing the whole business right there out of their living room.
Have I been a good provider?
You have. He was right. He was right.
Well, you don't know this.
I was making my jellies, and I caught you fish the other day, and so every time now, since you told me that, I mean, since we've thought about that, I'm like, that is funny that I'm kind of clever with the food and providing. And I do want to say that the story of Duck Commander, where it is now, because we're obviously talking about the Robertsons, but, you know, without Korie and her her family, what she learned earlier, her family and how they've been a part of that was huge. I mean, that was the missing link, was that business knowledge that her family had, and the stuff they would talk about. When we started dating, like I would sit at their dinner table with her grandfather, and much like ours, it was like our grandparents were there, and they would just talk business, and it was a little foreign to me, just the depth they talked about, buying and selling stuff and stores and opening. I mean, they did retail, and so it was I think those two things, when those two things came together with kind of what we had and what they had, that's what gave us the vision, the confidence to take it beyond where we was. Because I don't know that we never would probably seen past where we were. Like Dad thought we had sold all the duck calls to anybody who would buy one. It was like there's only a limited number, right? He was like, I think we've got our market share, and so I think that was the secret to our success, and the faith part as well, because as much as faith was a big deal to us, it was equally as important from Korie's family, the faith part. That's when, we met at summer camp, which was a new byproduct of Phil and Kay becoming Christians. So this was new to us, that we go to a church, which we never did that before. We go to a summer camp, which we didn't even know what it was. And so that's where, and actually Korie's grandpa and her mom and dad had actually started that summer camp. So now we're at these things. We were in the youth group together, and eventually went to Harding, which is a Christian school, which where Korie was going. And when she told me, I remember when we were young, Korie, we were like in 8th grade maybe, and we were talking on the phone, and Korie said she's going to Harding, and I thought she said Harvard.
Of course.
And so I told Dad, I said, Dad, this girl's going to Harvard. And he was like, whoa, she's smart, huh? And I said, yeah, that's where she said she's going. And I misheard her. I'd never heard of Harding. I didn't know there was a smaller one, not Harvard, that was in Searcy, Arkansas.
Oh, man. Y'all sent us the blind before it went out, and you don't know this, but it was a time where, for us, our business, it was really... Internally, we were struggling a lot, and the business was doing well, but we were broken. We were struggling with life. We were just like so lost. And that movie, I watched it probably 5 times. I cried each time. And it was it was this story of hope and realness and what you can do through Christ and family. And it's just so real and helps so many people. This movie obviously came out, but then there's a lot of others, I feel like, that are being inspired, and more content coming out around faith. But it was such a beautiful thing for us and our family.
Oh, well, thanks for saying that. It's been really just incredible to hear how it's affected people. That's been the greatest reward for it. But I really think that's why it was important for us to show that, because we were like, people see our family and are like, oh, this amazing family that has all this success and is on television, but like you have to know the story that brought us there. And I think the main people asked, like, what was the reason why you did it? What was the point? It was just that, like, don't give up hope. Like, no one's too far gone. God can do miraculous thing in anybody's life. And the fact that when we did Duck Dynasty, the episode that was like the most watched episode of all time was the episode where Phil and Kay renewed their vows. And it was so special to us because we knew the backstory. We knew how, like, that almost didn't happen. Phil and Kay, our story could have been totally different had they given up on one another at that time, had Phil not actually repented and Kay not truly forgiven. And so that was just important for us to tell that story and just to kind of offer that hope to other people, to say, like, oh, it's not all this. Like, look what God has brought us through to be where we are today.
Yeah, it's amazing what God can do in just one moment of faith there that led to so much.
Have you guys experienced that yourself? Because I feel like you guys talk a lot about the story of your parents, right? And like what they went through. But I think even through it, maybe in a different scale, but even through like just doing lives, like sort of like living your life in front of everybody as well. And just like going from like a smaller type of life to like, okay, now we have to like go and be with all these people. And that's very draining. So have you guys experienced something like that as well inside of your marriage? And how do you overcame that?
No, we never have. Actually.
No issues.
I don't know what the definition.
Corey's like, give me the mic.
I don't know what the definition of perfect is, but I think it's what. No, she knew y'all's was struggling. That's why she sent y'all the movie. No, I'm just joking. Yes, we have struggled, monstrously at different times, and where it could have been on the level of Phil and Kay. I mean, you're talking about there, though, a non-believing person that was and just making horrible decisions, and right at the cusp of losing everything. And so, and I've always said, like, I'm glad, because I always loved Dad's story, like, because it was like, that's a cool story. And I've heard others, I've been in settings where people were telling their stories, and I'm like, dang, I wish I had a great story like that, But then I'm thankful I don't. I'm thankful that I wasn't like, in jail or being chased by police, and living in the woods. I mean, I'm glad my life didn't get there. So I think we do improve, hopefully, on some of the things. But I think Korie and I have, 32 years of marriage. It's been, definitely rocky and icy at times, and trying to figure out, especially working together, is difficult because there's not a, you have to. It all gets immersed, when you're struggling at home. It all carries over to the workplace and all that. And Duck Dynasty for me, and I know we'll talk about the book, but I talk about it in the book, and just the struggle of where just how it's in the chapter called "Broke Propeller." Where I just feel like just had obliterated. Talk about the propeller pushing the boat, and I just growing up by a river, we would hear boats come racing down the river, and they would hit a stump, and then you just heard it boom, and it's just, and then nothing, the whole motor goes out. And so, I was definitely at a point like that, because it's hard because you're still in the spotlight, so it's not like you can go. Even church was difficult for me, because it was everywhere I went, it was just like you just felt like everybody's always looking at you, and everybody knows who you are, and so it's very difficult to even go. You just feel like you're really in a fishbowl in the spotlight, and always got to be on. And so so those were some tough times. Our marriage struggled. It was a lot of struggles, and thank goodness that we've moved on to a better place for sure.
How did that happen though? Like what made the change from being in that place? As we have felt it too. And so, like, same thing, like working together in business, having people that depend on us to, like, just be on the whole time. And then how do you overcome those times?
Well, I would say, I think Phil and Kay's story, it helped us because we knew that, and we saw that, and we saw the fruit of it, of the after, to say, like, okay, stick in here, like, don't give up. Because, had we not seen that modeled in their life and in my parents' life, they have a long marriage as well. And, like, to say, like, okay, there is fruit on the other side of this, but we have to get through this. And so I think their story helped us stay, whenever times are hard. It helped us stay. But practically, I would say, a friend of mine, this was earlier on in our marriage when we hit a difficult part. A friend of mine, I remember her saying, like, you need to go to the emergency room. And it was this, like, idea that, like, some things you could just, like, go to the doctor and get some medicine and, like, keep going. But some things you need to, like, go to the emergency room, like, check yourself into the hospital for a little bit. And, like, we kind of did. I remember thinking of that, at different times in our marriage, like, hey, this is a time when, like, we need to, like, treat this like this is a terminal illness that we need to get help for. And so go to counseling, take that time out, schedule some time away, like, get away and just focus on one another for a little bit. Just, treat it like a real, like, injury that someone might see on the outside, where sometimes in a marriage you can just keep covering and keep putting a Band-Aid on things. And so, we went to counseling. We took some time away. We scaled things back and said, okay, like, what do we need? Like, what's essential? What's not? What's working? What's not? What balls can we, like, set down so everything doesn't just fall? I always think about that with juggling. Like, in my life, it's like I got all these balls in the air, and it's like if I don't just set one down, then I'm going to drop all of them. And so, just spend some time doing that and treating it like a real emergency, because your marriage is the most important thing. Your family, and your children. That's the most important thing in your life. And so you need to treat it that way. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we treat all the other things like the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think you rely, I mean, and in those times you got to rely on, like we had built out teams and people, I'm sure like you have as well. And so, and normally Korie and I are the drivers of all of it. We're the ones who are pushing and guiding and counseling and all that. And then during those times you have to let other people, help and step in and run some things while you can take care of some things for sure. And I just believe in the Bible, and I think the Bible has the answers for relationships as well. And it's not like it separates marriages and friendships and then business. I think it covers all that, and so there's certainly a pattern in the New Testament to find where it is to get yourself back on track. So First John talks about confess your sins one to another, and you'll be saved and you'll be healed, and so we realize the value of that, and so which is honesty and saying, hey, I've screwed up here, like this is where I'm at, so repentance, which Korie mentioned earlier as well, like Phil, like we think about that as like kind of that story, like Phil's story, like, oh, I need to repent. I've been, but repentance is constant, I always say it's one of the ones that's not, it keeps going. And so if you think about the ideas, some of the tenets of faith, repentance is one, you can say it, but really it's only known when it's shown, because it means to change, and you don't know if you change until you can see change. And so as that goes on, I would say that when you confess Jesus as Lord, that's the same way. Like, it's not just a one-time thing. It's just like Korie and I, we confessed to each other we're going to be married. You see that live out day in, day out, week by week, year by year. You live your life by that. And so you say, this is why I do this, or this is why I don't do this, because Jesus is the Lord of my life. So I think that the system or the method is in the New Testament as far as how to find your way out and get yourself back to where you need to be. And I think those things, for me, they don't happen. It's not like this one time. It's like you gradually start, you start getting off course, and then you don't even wake up in the morning thinking you're, what I want to do? I want to make my life so much harder and start, be displeasing to my wife and God and all that. But you end up in a spot where you're like, what in the world am I thinking? And so that's how it goes. And I think that's how, probably the evil one works, just to slowly get you off, and you give here and you take here, and it's kind of like next thing you know, you're way off course or whatever. So, and that can happen. We've certainly seen that in business. We're talking about our marriage and relationships, but that can happen with employees. It happens in our business where we're like, right now we're kind of in a point up at the business where we're like, okay, we are redoing this. We're ready to, it's like you just realize, because even your workers will start getting that same kind of malaise as well. And you start getting comfortable and you're not pushing. And so, and then you realize too, like, I can't just fire everybody up here and bring in a bunch of new young people who are all eager, because you realize that's going to be difficult as well. People come in eager, but then
it's another energy that you have to.
Yeah, so it's that balance, of having your experienced people and all that without getting lazy and kind of lethargic and all that. So,
So your parents, you guys, what advice are you giving? Because you have amazing kids, it seems like, anyways. Maybe they're just terrible behind I don't know. But what advice are you giving them for your grandkids now? Like, how do we raise kids that are growing up and doing such great work in the world?
And I think to add to that, one of the things that we want to see happening is like to raise kids that when they don't need us and they don't have to spend time with us, they still want to spend time with us. And I feel like you guys have created that here. And so how do you do that? I think it's key.
Well, we love all of our. I don't know that I have all the answers, honestly, but we do love. All of our kids have kind of gone away and come back, and so that's like the greatest blessing. We're so thankful. We love it, and
both are important. Going away I think going away is important.
I think, I think so too. Yeah.
You need to not going away from the Lord, but just
create your own, create your own
Independence.
kind of like family unit and what that might be and what that might look like. So, not all of them have gone away, I guess. Belle and Jacob haven't gone away, but they're creating their own little family unit here, and it's so sweet to see. So we're really grateful for that. We don't really know the magic of that, but I just feel like, one, it's just being real with your kids and honest and authentic. And, I always say, this is the hardest part of parenting. I think it's like when you're like, oh, I want my kids to be brave, but if you're not brave yourself, then they're not going to be that. I want my kids to be generous, but if you're not generous, I want them to be kind, but if you're not kind, so then it like always kind of comes back to like, oh, we actually have to model that for our kids if that's what we want to see in our kids. And I think, early on, we really just we don't care what they do in life. We just want to put these values in them and the kind of people that we want. That we hope that they are, who they are, and I don't know if that answers. I can't remember your first question was.
Well, just advice. Like, what are you giving? What are you helping them and saying, hey, you should do this with your kids? They're raising these young kids, and ours are 6 and 3. Mm-hmm. It's a crazy world. They're all over the place. They're playing t-ball, or if you can call it that for the first time. Like t-ball.
Oh, yeah. We're in the wee ball and all that right now, too. Yeah. Our oldest grandson's 5 and youngest is like 7 months. So we're all in those ages. It's so fun and so sweet to see the little personalities. One of the things that I think I've realized even more now looking back, because I kept a little journal of our kids when they were little and wrote things about them and things I saw in them and all that. And it's just amazing to see how God created each of them like so uniquely, so originally. Sadie's whole ministry is called Live Original because Willie nicknamed her the original when she was little. But I think even now I can look back because those things that were in them when they were 3 are still in them when they're 23. Yeah. It's just amazing. And so I think as parents, one of the things that I feel like I wish I'd have even known even more then is like God created them who they are. Our job is to kind of like protect that, to encourage that, to see that in them and draw that out in them, not to like make them, mold them and shape them into what we want them to be. But our job is to say, oh, who did God create you to be? And how do I come around you as a mom to like love you and encourage that in you and grow that in you and call that out in you, and also put the protections in place that like the things that the world wants to try to knock out of you or take your confidence or make you feel shame or guilt or make you feel this. Like, how do I put some things to kind of surround you and shore you up while you grow and you build that resilience to be able to say like, oh no, I know who I am. And so I think that's the thing. It's like when I see my grandkids now, it's like, you see this little person that God created in them and how he just knit them so uniquely. And I see it even more now, I think, than when you're young parents, you're just like trying to like survive. Yeah, you're just like who, exactly. Who changed the last diaper? Okay, it's your turn. You're just trying to survive. But now you can look back and see it so much more. So I think if you can have that perspective, when you're in the midst of it, then it's even better.
Yeah, I think you've got to model it. You've got to live the way you're telling them you've got to live it. And so I think they'll always see the authenticity in that. I saw that in my parents. I saw that, especially the faith part where Phil was preaching the gospel. Like I saw him do that. So it wasn't like he talked about it on Sundays and I saw it every day. And I think your kids are going to see you. And I think what Korie spoke to is so true. Like if we tell our kids something, but then we don't. Like we're like, don't be on your phone all the time. But if you're on your phone all the time, then it's to a kid that's got to seem so weird that you're telling them not to do that, and then they constantly see you just constantly on your phone. I think we do it in sports. I think we do it in all those things. It's like the most important thing's God, and then until it comes to baseball, and I call it baseball church. Until it comes to that, or to even these can be good things, education, where it's like you can see parents like it's, you know what's important because they're just like, you have to get these grades, you're going to have to get this because we're going to get into this school. And then even if it's a school that may not be good for them even spiritually, but the you know, I'm talking about the Harvard or the Harding, you know, it's like, it's such a status symbol. And I can just see it. I've talked to parents where I'm like, that's the most important thing to you, you know, you're going to go out and tell all your friends that my kid is this and they did this. And none of that may not have any, none of that has any eternal consequences whatsoever who they are as people. So I think you've got them all at. As far as advice, I think one of the main things that we do that that probably picked up on Duck Dynasty was we just try not to take ourselves too seriously and just have fun. And we've hung out together, and so, and y'all have seen there where we laugh a lot. And so I think one of the reason our kids are, you know, I can hit most of their houses with a set of golf clubs, is because it is fun. It's a fun place. It's fun to be together. I thought of certain things that we're talking about providing. One of the big things I was like, I'm going to cook and cook really good so that people want to come. And my kids, that has been such an instrumental part of all my kids now that they're adults and all that. And because our house was like that. Like, our house was like, when you wanted good food, people would gravitate down to mom and dad's because you knew the food was going to be just excellent. And stuff you couldn't buy in a store, you know, like the fried fish and all this stuff that, you know, whether it's deer or crawfish or whatever it is that we're cooking. And so that's really been a tool that we've been, you know, in the Bible, I guess it'd be called hospitality, you know, where it's like, and sharing. I mean, just there's a lot of aspects to that, but it's like every night someone is here, someone is over, which means the grandkids are over. So there's always something. So this is just kind of a hub of life of all those things, and then teaching them that as well. And so stark difference, you know, because Duck Dynasty, we sat at that dinner table and we had so many people go like, we don't, not only do we not pray together over our meal, we don't even sit together as a meal. Yeah. And most of the people that we know are just running, gunning, grabbing, eating on the way. And so, man, these moments, I mean, when I think about my childhood, we lived at the end of a dead-end road. We did not go out to eat hardly ever because we didn't have a lot of money, and it was like 30 minutes back to town. So a lot of those moments and memories were at that table, man. That's where we learn how to tell stories. That's where we learn how to, you know, learn from the generations above. And so those are huge. I think so fondly of those memories. And so creating that takes work, and it takes intention to say, no, we're going to, you know, sit down and have this and slow that pace down. You know, one of the things I appreciated about growing up the way I did, the pace was slow, but it was so consistent. Like I knew where everything was. As a kid, I would get home and be like, okay, I know it wasn't just like chaotic. And so I think that's important for our kids. And again, it's back to the Bible. It's back to those instilling in them those virtues that we live by.
Yeah, yesterday, actually, Bella texted and she was like, is Dad cooking anything for lunch? And he wasn't. He was still...
She said, do y'all have any food? She was looking for leftovers.
She first said, is he cooking for lunch?
I heard the conversation. She said...
No, it started...
And then I said, I can cook. I said, I can cook something, which I was working on something, but I said, I can always cook something. So.
Exactly. And so she was like, well, I have a pack of chicken. And so it's like, I'll bring over the chicken. Willie was like, I can make quesadillas, you know. So it's like that. And
it was like a cooking show, you know, where they go, okay, I got one pack of chicken. I'm like,
what are you doing?
Okay, because I was like, if I don't go to the store, all right, I can figure this out.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I am not the cook. He's the cook. And so I'm so thankful. When he's out of town, though, it's been really sweet because when he travels, all of our kids like take care of me because they know I don't cook. They're like, are you eating anything tonight? Do you want to come over? So it's so sweet. So I pop into all their houses and they've started cooking, and it's been really fun to see. That's been a really great reward. And one of the things he touched on that I was thinking about is that making your home fun and a space that you want kids to be. I think whenever we started Duck Dynasty, I remember a lot of like well-meaning Christians were concerned for us. They were like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, you know, your kids are going to end up on drugs. You're going to end up divorced. Like, you're going to do reality TV. And I just remember thinking that, like, and then we had criticism, you know, from Christian people who thought, oh, you should do this more or whatever, you know. And I just remember thinking, like, as Christians, are we more known for like what we're against than what we're for? And I think a lot of homes are, you know, and kids will leave the church because their families are more known for like what they're against as Christians and what they're for as Christians. And so I think for us, like that, we really wanted to create a home and a space that's like, we want to be known for what we're for. Like we're for people, we're for loving people. We were, you know, really were intentional about taking our kids to travel, to see the world, and to, you know, to ways you can serve and ways we can serve as a family. So like, we're not, you know, we don't want to be known for what we're against. We want to be known for what we're for. And, I think that's something that creates a home that, you know, your kids want to be that.
You have no idea how much I appreciate that. So, you know, those moments where you have a debate with your husband and wife, and then someone later reaffirms your side of the debate. Just yesterday, Karen and I were talking. We're about to build a new house, and I was like, I want it to be this like adventure land. There's gonna be a pond for fishing. We're having an indoor basketball court. It's gonna be a place where people want to come. She's like, yeah, I think we should just make it, you know, just a little, like, you know, just us, you know, just that. And I'm like, yeah,
like
see,
this is
well,
he's like the playland.
I did say no to the bowling alley. He wanted to put in when we built this house, he was like, can we just put like a bowling alley? And I was like, that's too far. That is too far, but it would have been fun.
It wasn't too far. If we had it, it would be awesome. We would be doing this interview
at the bowling
alley right now. You know, if you can. I think but I will say this, JC, you've got to, the stuff you have, here's what's interesting. My family does not all live here because of the cool stuff that we have. It's not the pond. It's not the indoor trampoline. I mean, how you call it? In-ground trampoline, the pickleball court. It's really not that, because I know so many people who have way more money than I do, who are famous and super wealthy. And when you go their places, it's like a ghost town. Nobody goes there. And they've got all this stuff. And so it's really who you are is what it'll bring. And the same spirit that we have was the same spirit that was down there at my mom and dad's house, where everybody was there all the time. And when you go there, you got to want to be there. But it was just this inviting, hospitable, open, did have good food. Good food is but it was like people want to be there because they want to be. And so I wanted to be, when you live your lives that are attractive, and I think all that comes from the fruits of the Spirit and who we are in Jesus, that should be attractive. That should not be repelling. And sometimes, you know, I know a few people maybe in Cersei who are like, they're, you know, in West Monroe too, but they're believers, but man, somehow whatever the aroma they're putting out, it's uninviting, you know, and it's like, it's real rigid. And so I think you've got to be, when you live your life like that, and then you'll be attractive. But whether that's in a season of plenty or a season of nothing, you know, that same spirit's there. And so it is I think that is the key to it. That's the key is being around people, no matter what circumstance you're in.
I love it.
I was going to say, the house I grew up in is similar to Willie's in that just really hospitable. Lots of people come, and like, they always have someone living with them. Somebody in the summertime, whenever camp's going on, all the counselors are like piled up on the couches and everywhere they can sleep. And my mom's not a cook, so you don't have to be a cook to have a hospitable house, but it does help. It does help a lot.
Wait a minute. Her house and the house I grew up in has nothing similar. The things she's talking about are, but the actual structure that's the Taj Mahal. Like, I mean, like, that place was legit. They have a swimming pool. You know?
I'm saying the spirit.
They have a swimming pool. We have a river. You know?
Let's talk about the book before we jump off here. So you got a new book. I had to look up what this meant, but you can tell everyone. So, Gospeller.
You had to look that up. Where'd you go to college?
Jeez, I went to this little old place in Arkansas.
Oh, you went to Harding and you didn't know about Gospeller?
Yeah,
come on, man.
I'm sorry.
I went to Jimmy Allen's class.
The business side. Barely on that side.
Yeah. This is, I didn't know the word either. Korie found the word. So I was writing this book on sharing your faith, and I was so impacted by my parents' story, because I started thinking about the first chapter just deals with that. Like, what if someone hadn't have shared their faith with them? Their marriage was over. Phil had kicked us out of the house. The only thing left was just a wholesale life change in the gospel. The gospel came in at just the right time. But had that not happened, as you play this forward 50 years, we wouldn't be speaking to y'all right now. There would have been, I probably wouldn't have met her at the summer camp. Life, it just would have literally turned into something completely different. And I thought, wow. So I'm appreciative of that in the past, but then I think about the future, like, who is it that I'm sharing my faith with that may affect their kids and their grandkids and their business and their marriage and all these things. And so I was writing this book because I had been able to share with a lot of people over my entire life, young, older, and originally it was like, we're going to call it something with evangelists, and Korie came in. I never forget, I was sitting in there, and she goes, I found this cool word, and she was hoping I would think it was cool as well. And but she was looking up words, and she found this word called gospeller, and it was simply someone who shared their faith publicly or personally, and not necessarily, not like pastoral, not like a job, just like a person who were known. And so as I studied the word, it was very common. It was used all the time, and it was just people who were known for sharing the gospel with people. They were called known gospelers, and I was like, that is an awesome word. What a perfect word. And so, I think it's ironic that the word used to be very common and now it's not. And I think even sharing our faith has become like that, where you just don't find people who are known for that. They're Christians, but not like out, seeking change in that. And so, really wanted to put this down on paper. So poured my heart and soul into it. It kind of came about during COVID because I wasn't able to travel and speak like I do, and so I was kind of here and doing a lot of cooking and serving here, and started teaching a class actually at the church on how to share your faith with people, and because I kind of had the knack for it. And I was talking to a friend, and actually a guy I just met, and he said, I was telling him what I was doing. He said, man, I've never seen it quite like that. He said, you should put that in a book. And that's where it started. And I was I'm proud to put down a lot of these stories and to capture them for my kids and my family, for my grandkids. And as when I pass away, and people can read these stories and be like, wow, and hopefully they'll see what at least I was all about, like, was getting the gospel out to other people. And it's not that we can't do great things in life. I think that's fine. I think sometimes as Christians we're thinking, well, that's what the world does, and we're just meet in our little church buildings. And I think we should do great, big, giant things. And I've been able to be on TV and done a lot of really cool things in business. But man, I don't want to be known for that. I don't want that on my gravestone, and I don't want that to be all that's talked about at my funeral. I want to talk about the people that I was able to talk to and that had that same life change that I saw Phil and Kay have, that directly affected all of their children, that then affected their sons and or their daughters-in-laws and their grandkids and their grandkids. And we can see now through the podcast, through the movies, through the social media followings, through hundreds of millions of people all around the globe have in some way been touched by the gospel. And I can trace that back down, at least in my family, to one little couple living in Junction City, Arkansas, who had no money, no anything, whose life was just looked like it was completely hopeless, but the gospel came in. Yeah. And so who else could that be? What other people could that be? And they're not going to know unless we share it. And so hopefully this is just a tool for people to read. Hopefully they'll gain inspiration. I give kind of I only have like 7 passages that I generally, when I talk to people, that's where I start. And we just kind of walk through it. And so hopefully it'll, spur on people to go like, hey, I think I can do that. Because what I found was when I taught my class, we disqualify ourselves for many reasons, but there's some that are just like, well, I don't know the Bible, and it's not my gift. And isn't that what the preacher does? And so that we've kind of gotten away from who I believe the Great Commission was for, which was all of us. And there was 3 things he said, do: make disciples, baptize people, and teach people. And I just realized if I'm living my life and I'm not anywhere around any of those 3, like, I may not be on the right mission.
Yeah.
And that's what I find from a lot of people. They're not on the right mission. The mission for them is like, I try to go to church and I try to be a good person. That's not a mission, you know. That's a low bar, you know.
Yeah.
Jesus said, when he left, he said, this is what you need to be doing. And I find that when you live your life like that, when you're actively around those three things, you have to open your mouth, you have to have conversations, and it should be as natural as Korie and I have been talking, where I'm referencing her nonstop. It should be no different than referencing Jesus. You know, when that relationship looks like that, which Paul said the mystery of marriage is like the mystery of Christ and the church, you know, that's that same two become one. And so when we live our lives like that, it'll be impossible to separate. And so for me to not ever mention her name in a conversation would be really strange. And so I feel like it's the same way with Jesus. People are hurting, especially right now. People are hopeless. They've put, I mean, look what happened during COVID. They put everything in their business, and then it went kaput. They put hope in government, and then you look up, and I promise you'll be disappointed, you know, either this cycle or next cycle, you know, and you put all your hopes and dreams, even in your family and your kids grow up, and they move out, and they move to, you know, Nashville like everybody else, and then you rarely see them, and then you're just sitting there alone, and then marriages fall apart. And so people are looking for these things, the answers, and so it needs to be modeled, but it needs to be talked about. And so that's why I wrote the book.
I love it. You guys are awesome. I appreciate y'all and taking the time with this, and I'm really excited about reading the book. I think we're on that journey as well of like, okay, we've had a little success, but what for the sake of what's this for? And so I'm excited to read the book more, and I really appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Great talking to you.